There is so much talk in India about the emergence of our country in the years to come, potentially as the third largest economy in the world. And there are very few people who travel quite as much and have as much of an outside-in exposure on what's happening in India relative to what's happening in the rest of the world than the president of the World Economic Forum, Borge Brende, who's here. Thank you very much, Borge, for joining us at the Business Today India at 100 Summit. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Thank you.
No, thank you for inviting me, and great to see you again. I saw you're in great shape in the conversation with Brad Smith, so...
You know, if anybody could have followed that scintillating conversation with Brad Smith, it has to be Borge. So he's a great friend of India, and we're absolutely delighted to have you here with us. Borge, could we start this conversation by you laying out how you see the India story at the World Economic Forum in a global context, given all that's happening in the world at this moment in terms of geopolitics, in terms of economics? Where do you see India relative to how Indians see the India story? How do you at the World Economic Forum, as its presidents, see what's happening in India right now?
So India has come out of the COVID in a much stronger position than many other countries. It is a fact that India is now the fastest growing of the big economies, but it's not once off. It's for the third year in a row that India is the fastest growing economy. So congratulations on that. And congratulations on being successful in landing on the south pole of the moon.
That's very nice. Thank you. I think, that's something that all Indians are very proud of.
Yeah, but I think it really shows that India is really, it's a staggering change going on in this country. And I was reflecting on why is this. I think it started in a way also with this digital ID. Maybe it was controversial at the beginning, but you know, to have the largest population in the world, 1.4 billion people, all have a digital ID, is a prerequisite for a lot of other things, and that is digital connect. Most of Indians are now digitally connected. I was just seeing on TV a few weeks ago, it was a grandmother up in Assam sitting there on her cell and wiring money to the grandchildren on her cell. Where is that happening other places in the world, in a developing country that is an emerging economy? And the fact that you have then demographic dividend that will be positive for you probably 30 to 40 years to come, no shrinking of the workforce. And if the workforce is digitally connected and knows how to operate, huge opportunities.
India this year is the president of the G20, and Prime Minister Modi will be hosting the Big Leaders Summit in early September. How do you see India's presidency? PM Modi has just given Business Today an exhaustive interview, his first on the G20, where he sees the G20 emerge as a catalyst for a new global order. And there's a lot of talk about emerging as a leader of the global south, sitting in the north, Norway and in Switzerland. How do you see India's efforts at trying to be a catalyst in establishing a new global order? Borge?
As you know, Rahul, Switzerland is also a neutral country, so Switzerland is dealing with all the different players and actors. But it is true that there is a new order. It's definitely the post-Cold War order is not anymore there. But I think we are between orders. We don't exactly know what the new order is. But there are fundamental economic changes going on, and that we do know. So the economists at the World Economic Forum also definitely are saying that India will become the third largest economy in the world in a couple of years. So you're bypassing Germany and Japan, and it will be then the US, China, the so-called G2. But my prediction, and I coined this for you here today, I think in a decade, we will be faced with a G3.
Wow, that's interesting. Can we have a round of applause, please?
And
This is the first time I'm hearing of G3.
Yeah, the G3 is the US, China, and India. And that is a new reality. So far, India has not really leveraged its strength in the global geopolitics. India has been a little bit shy about that. I think what Prime Minister Modi is showing now is that India will also play a more important role when it comes to shaping the new order. And the new order needs to mean that the global south will have more influence. It will need to also be reflected in the UN, in the Bretton Woods institutions, and the new institutions. So I think India has a lot of influence with the so-called global swing states.
I haven't heard the articulation of this idea of a G3. It's a very powerful idea that you've laid forward. Are you just saying that, Borge, because you're in India and you're catering to this domestic constituency, and as an erstwhile politician, you want to say what they want to hear? Or do you actually believe that in the manner in which this new world order is emerging, in the manner in which a new India is being built, that a G3 is indeed possible? There is a new world order.
So if you coin something in the days of Twitter or X, or if you do it on a TV show, it's not like that it's kept in India anymore. Things do spread very fastly. So I think with using this term G3, I think I have to be able to also argue for it, and in other places. It will probably come up even in Davos. Doesn't mean that G3 is the only dimension. I think the G3 is showing that there are going to be 3 really strong economies. India is already then contributing this year probably to 16% of the global growth. That shows already that the 3 trillion economy that I think will grow into a 10 trillion economy in the coming decade is already having a lot of influence. I think that in addition to the G3, I think Europe still plays an important role, but that is as the EU. It's still the largest market in the world, the single market. But also Africa is growing at an exponential level. The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is for 1.5 billion people. Extremely powerful, and I think with Prime Minister Modi, when he also insisted on inviting the African Union, I think both to the BRICS, but also to the G20, was showing visionary leadership, because Africa and Latin America are growing very fast in addition to ASEAN.
You know, you're estimating a $10 trillion economy by 2033, and that's a very bullish estimate. There are aspects of the India story which are very promising. And yet, there have been things that happen in India that may frustrate you or make you tear your hair apart in terms of reforms that you'd like or things that you'd like to happen a certain way. Do you want to spend a moment on that? At this moment, what more would you like to see India do to be able to grow faster, to develop faster, and to be a bigger player in the international world trade order?
So, to grow faster, if you grow 8%, it's a bit hard. Of course, China at once grew at 10%. I think India can grow 8 to 10%. I think it's more than a question, how can that continue? How can you sustain that growth for the coming decade? And I think then you have to continue with reforms. Countries that stop reforming will also stop growing at that level. So every year there will need to be a new reform agenda. I think a prerequisite for the growth that we have seen is the digital connections, and also the fact that you're able, and that will be a big surplus, because I'm worried that we can move into a decade of low growth if we don't get it right now. We're seeing that growth is seriously slowing in Europe. We see that growth is also slowing in China and even have some deflation. If we don't continue to trade with each other and have a win-win approach, I think we can have a repetition of the 70s. That was a lost decade when it came to growth, 10 years with low growth. But why am I partly bullish that we can avoid this? And that is related to the new technologies. I think not only AI, but also big data, the changes in biology, we see it also in the health area. I think those new technologies will increase the productivity. We will produce even higher up in the value chain. And I think that can potentially lead to the necessary growth stimulus in the global economy. Of course, some people are afraid, oh, we will lose our job because AI. But you know, since the Industrial Revolution, all new technologies kill some jobs, but they lead to new and more interesting jobs higher up in the value chain, and you can get more prosperous. This time, India is not losing out on a new industrial revolution. I think if India gets it right, you can even drive the fourth industrial revolution. You see manufacturing is coming into this country. You also see that it's not only the back office of the world anymore, it can even be the front office. But then the government has to not get complacent. It has to then continue with the reforms. You have to invest more in the infrastructure. You have to invest more also in education. You have to invest more in research and development. That's where the new tax base will, and the tax and revenues will have to be invested in what can increase your competitiveness. And the digital IDs and all this has led to increased revenues from taxes without increasing the tax levels. This is incredible, but no, invest in the future, not in the past.
You know, the World Economic Forum has been at the forefront of ideating and innovating on the fourth industrial revolution, and that's been one of your big ideas at Davos, which your founder, Klaus Schwab, is very personally passionate about. Do you want to share with this audience here how you see the fourth industrial revolution play itself out in the Indian context? Because India has missed out initially on account of British colonialism and later on account of the country not being equipped at that moment on some of the previous industrial revolutions. How do you see the fourth industrial revolution story play out from all the frameworks and parameters that you've drawn?
So first, let me come back to where we are today. Globally, there are 4 billion people that are not adequately digitally connected. India is not in that group anymore because you have 1.4 billion people that are digitally connected. You know, maybe not all 1.4 billion, but a lot of them. So there you have like a positive dividend. So this time, India has a good opportunity to benefit from this new revolution. As I mentioned, no, India has to be fast in implementing these new technologies. AI is changing the way you operate. If you can then choose to let AI take on some of the back office's role, or you can have it supporting you to be more effective, I would take it on and then be more effective, and then you can use the skills and the labor to other things that do pay more off. For those that are like, you know, it was for those that stick to the sailboats when there are other ships there, they lost. So it's really, really important now to bring it on. I think one of the challenges India has, though, is the skills gap. There needs to be a lot of upskilling, reskilling, and right skilling, because there are no more jobs in this area than there are skills. So that skills gap has to be closed, because you need to then have the right people to go into these jobs.
No, but do you see that as a threat for a country like India? It could be an opportunity if you're able to up your skill game, but the fact that the quality of the higher educational institutes that we have aren't necessarily producing en masse top-end computer engineers or scientists or AI programmers. Instead, you're producing a bunch of generalists, some of whom may be super specialists at the very cutting edge of what's happening in Silicon Valley, in the US and in India, but a lot of them, which means potentially, do you see, we've already seen from McKinsey and from several other top corporates, estimates of job losses running into the hundreds of millions.
So, as I said, in all industrial revolutions we have gone through, there has been jobs in the past that will be replaced by technology. Those that are slow in implementing and hugging the new technologies will not do so well. These countries will then have lower growth than those countries that embrace the new technologies, are first movers and fast movers, and they will then get more interesting jobs and they will do better. You know, it is not a priori given that if you do well today, that you're guaranteed to do well tomorrow. After the Second World War, Argentina was probably the second or third richest country in the world. It took 10 years, and they were a lower middle income country. Look at Kenya and South Korea. In 1960, they had the same GDP per capita. Today, South Korea has 30 times the GDP per capita than Kenya. So this also shows that India has huge opportunities if you continue the reforms, don't get complacent, invest the additional revenues now in upskilling, better education, research and development. When you can land this thing on the south pole of the moon, you can also get a much better primary education, secondary education, upgrade your universities, invest in all these areas. I think another thing, since you also, Rahul, asked about reforms, I think there is a bit of reforms potential still on the red tape in this country. You need to be world-leading in setting up businesses, getting away from unnecessary bureaucracy. Of course, you have to have rules and regulations, but it should not take a long time if a young person has an idea, wants to commercialize it, set up this. It takes too long still to get these things done. And that, I think, will be a part of the next reforms that will come. And there has to be a reform agenda every year, and then I'm very bullish on this.
That's a very important point you make. You also mentioned how countries like Argentina crashed economically in a matter of a few years. And that's where leadership becomes very important. Because in the hands of the right leaders, like China had in the 70s and the 80s, you can uplift millions of people from poverty. In the hands of the wrong leadership, a country can suffer economically. You've had many an opportunity to meet Prime Minister Modi. How do you, Borge, compare the leadership, personality, and approach of Prime Minister Modi with the cross-section of leaders that you meet internationally?
So India has now a leadership under Prime Minister Modi that has been persistently introducing reforms. So, of course, some of the benefits is we're seeing on, for example, the digital ID, that is also coming from former governments. That's for sure. But this government has shown business friendliness. I think also the results speak for themselves. So we don't, in the World Economic Forum, get involved into party politics and all this, and I know there is an upcoming election, but you asked me about the discussions I have had the privilege to have with the Prime Minister, and I feel that the Prime Minister really cares and understands also the business environment and how important that is for India, and the result speaks for itself. India is fast growing, but no, you have to secure that also for the coming years.
Okay, how do you see the economic situation in China. We're seeing a lot of signs of potential economic distress. China is one of the major engines of the global economy and a prime driver of growth, or at least has been in the last couple of decades. What's your reading of where the China economic story goes from here, sir?
So it's complex. First, one has to congratulate China for all what they have achieved since they started to open up their economy in 1979 with Deng Xiaoping. 1 billion people are lifted out of extreme poverty. They have a GDP per capita now around $10,000 US. They're almost the same size of their economy as the US. China is now around 20% of the global economy. When the reforms started, they were 1.5% of the global economy. So that is exceptional. I think for China now, they have made a lot of investments in infrastructure, in real estate, and they have based their growth model on an export-led growth. I think they're now seeing that the infrastructure investments have to, in the future, be cost-effective. They have invested too much in infrastructure. They have an overinvestment in real estate, and they're seeing that they also have to pivot now from export-led growth to also more domestic growth, and they have a huge home market. But that pivoting will, of course, take some time, and that's where they are in the middle of these reforms now. And it will be important for China to go through those reforms to again see growth back, maybe not where it was, but higher than today. And also, the situation with the US is not ideal for China, because these two economies are big, and you see that some manufacturing is moving out of China to Vietnam, India, because you see a diversification of the value chains. So China will also now is facing a situation where they have to incentivize more FDIs.
Do you want to spend a moment talking about the regulation of artificial intelligence? Because you've got national concerns where everybody wants to be in charge of data, every country wants its own laws, and yet a lot of the changes are very global. We've seen India in the last parliament session come out with a new data privacy law, which is several years late already. It doesn't focus much on AI, whereas that's the law that we need at this moment. But there's a lag between needing a law and the law coming through a consultative process and ultimately getting implemented. What are the ideas you have at the World Economic Forum about how AI should be regulated?
I'm happy to answer that. Maybe just say 2 words about why this is so complicated because of the geopolitics. So in a fractured world, fragmented world, where there is a lot of competition, we barely can agree on anything. The UN Security Council is very toxic, and they used to agree on a lot of stuff, but not anymore. But the paradox is that still some of the major challenges that we are faced with globally, they travel without a passport. And if they travel without a passport, it means that the only way to deal with it is that more than one country come together and agree on some rules and regulations that is in the interest of humankind. So after the Second World War, we were able to agree on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. We, of course, know that terrorists and other unfriendly nations should not have access to nuclear weapons. Now coming to AI. I think AI, artificial intelligence, the new technologies, also quantum computing, has a lot of potential benefits. We have not seen that any of the technology breakthroughs have not been good for the world. It has replaced some manual work. We have then increased our prosperity. And the world is in a very good shape in that respect. But we also know that AI, if it's not controlled, if it comes in the hands of the wrong people, it can influence a lot of our systems in a negative way.
We've just witnessed a landmark session, and this will be spoken of for many months and years to come, because you heard for the first time, in my view, the construct of a G3 being laid out. And this is very significant because this hasn't been spoken of earlier. From the president of the World Economic Forum, the idea that in 10 years from now, India will be a $10 trillion economy by 2033, and that the global order will be restructured in a way that the world will talk about G3, the United States, China, and India. That's an important idea which you've laid out. You're saying you'll build on this at the World Economic Forum at Davos next year, and this is the first time you've spoken about it. And as he said, he'll be challenged and questioned when he goes to Europe or he goes to Africa or he goes elsewhere about the idea of the prospect and the promise that India holds. You've also laid out the challenges. I said at the beginning that Borge is a great friend of India, and he just explained why. He also said it's not because of his friendship, but because of the conviction that they have about how the India story is shaping up from here. Can we have a very warm round of applause as we thank Borge Brende, President of the World Economic Forum, for having come to the Business Today India at 100 Summit. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Once again, India Today wins Best Channel of the Year.
Thank you very much, viewers, for making the India Today Group the most awarded TV news network at the ENVA Awards 2023.
अगर वो सरकार ये कहती थी कि ये इंटरनेशनल प्राइसेस की वजह से एलपीजी के दाम बढ़ते हैं, आज चुनाव से 6 महीने पहले उनको वो दाम घटाने पड़ रहे हैं, इसका मतलब दोबारा से चुनने आने की उम्मीद भारतीय जनता पार्टी की कम हुई है। जिस तरीके से विपक्ष की तीसरी बैठक इंडिया अलायंस की बैठक होने वाली है, उसको लेके घबराहट साफ जाहिर है।
महंगाई एक मुद्दा है, लोग चुप हैं, लोग डरते हैं, लोग अपनी बात, जो दिल की बात है, अपनी मन की बात सामने नहीं रखते, और 2024 में जब वोट करने जाएंगे तो वो बात वोटों के द्वारा सामने आ जाएगी। गरीबी इतनी ज़्यादा है आज के दिन कि 900 रुपया भी किसके पास है, किस परिवार के पास है कि सिलेंडर पहले तो आप सिलेंडर का दाम वाम दो तो इंस्टॉलमेंट्स में, फिर हर नए सिलेंडर पे 900 रुपया। गरीब आदमी के पास इतनी ताकत है ही नहीं।
Hello everyone, this is Anita Brito in conversation with the one and only श्याम कौशल. हेलो सर, कैसे हो आप?
हेलो, नमस्कार जी।
अभी भी आप कंटिन्यू कर रहे हो और आपके बहुत अच्छे अच्छे लाइनअप्स है, जैसे आपने बोला डंकी है, फिर आपके पास जो बंगाली मूवी है वो भी है,
ये बंगला बंधु। हाँ जी,
प्लीज उसके बारे में थोड़ा इन डेप्थ बात कीजिए, थोड़ा डंकी के बारे में हमें बात कीजिए। इट्स एन ऑल एंड आउट एक्शन फिल्म?
नो, इट इज नॉट ए, देयर इज एक्शन इन इट।
बट मुझे ये जानना है आपसे, ये पर्सनल क्वेश्चन है, आपको सबसे ज्यादा कौन से एक्टर के साथ काम करके मजा है, मुझे ये बताइए।
मैंने अमित जी के साथ काम किया, अमित जी से लेके सभी के साथ जितने भी आगे ना, सभी के साथ काम किया। फिर जो साउथ के भी मोस्टली सुपरस्टार्स, उनके साथ भी काम किया। पर आज तक भगवान की दुआ से कभी किसी के साथ इशू नहीं हुआ, कभी कुछ नहीं हुआ, सबसे प्यार ही मिला है। तो मेरा एक मानना होता है, जैसा मैं आज भी ओपनली बोलता हूँ कि पिछले मैं 43 साल में मेरे को कोई बुरा आदमी नहीं मिला। तो मैं कभी सोचता नहीं हूँ कि अगर कुछ कमियां होंगी तो मेरे में होंगी। कोई बुरा आदमी नहीं है, कोई भी ऐसा। जब मैं एक्टर्स, मेरे जो छोटे हैं, जैसा रणबीर सिंह, रणबीर कपूर, अर्जुन कपूर, उन्होंने मेरे साथ शुरू किया, जब भी मिलते पैर छूते हैं, ऐसा बच्चों की तरह। तो आप अगर उनको प्यार देते हो तो आपको सामने से प्यार मिलेगा ही।
It is my absolute pleasure to welcome to the Business Today India at 100 Summit a technological leader who's really been at the cutting edge of the revolution that we're seeing in artificial intelligence. Can we have a very warm round of applause as we welcome to the stage Mr. Brad Smith, the Global President of Microsoft. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. Business Today magazine has just scooped an interview of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and why I plug it into this conversation is because this image is generated through generative artificial intelligence. So pervasive is AI in all of what we are doing at this moment that what was earlier in the realm of a distant future has now just seeped into our lives in so many different parts of it. Could you, Mr. Smith, start this conversation by giving everyone seated here a sense of what's coming? We've already been wowed by everything that AI has thrown up so far, ChatGPT-4, everything that Microsoft is showcasing. In your view, from where you're sitting, where are we heading to next?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here with all of you. It's great to be here with you, Rahul. And we've been on a bit of a hype cycle, I think it's fair to say. It's pretty amazing when you think that it was really just the last week in November that ChatGPT was released and people started to imagine what it could do. And I think that first month was all about, oh my gosh, this stuff actually works. And by January or February, people were really excited. It was like, oh my God, this could save the world. And by April, everybody in many countries was looking at each other and saying, oh my Lord, it's going to destroy us all. And it's been a roller coaster. But as I travel the world, and I appreciate the business audience in this room, this is a summer that is really, as I call the sandbox summer. Thousands of our customers are developing proofs of concept. You know, they're developing the pilots in the sandboxes, if you will. And I think what we're going to see over the next 6 to 12 months is an enormous amount of practical advance. And what we're going to see, I think, especially in the world of business, is fundamentally two things. Companies are taking their line of business, and they're very focused on innovating, creating their own IP, figuring out how they can do better and more efficiently whatever it is that they do at the heart or core of their company. And at the same time, every other function that every one of our businesses has in common are being reshaped as well. So whether it's HR or finance or legal or sales or marketing or advertising or sales, we're seeing AI make its way into the software that people use. You certainly see that in terms of the Microsoft software that people use. All of this should unleash productivity growth. And that should be good for this economy. It should be good for every economy around the world. And ultimately, this should be good for people. I do think people get most excited, rightly so, at what this can do for something like healthcare. The ability to enable doctors to diagnose diseases, to identify patterns in a sea of data. The opportunity it brings to improve education, to create digital tutors for students and their parents. Even something as simple as something I experience every day now that I'm using the early versions of what we call M365 Copilot. Imagine a teacher who can take a lesson plan and say, create 6 PowerPoint slides for me based on this lesson plan in a Word document. And 37 seconds later, there's a good first draft of a PowerPoint deck. All of these things are really, as you say, becoming part of our lives.
You know, the India Today newsroom has been at the forefront of implementing different aspects of artificial intelligence in multiple processes. You know, we have this very short clip I wish to play out, and I want to talk about how the world could change content creation, and then also different aspects of what all of you do in your work and in your personal lives could change as a result of the phenomenal capabilities of generative AI, which are now available out in the world. So can we have that clip play now, please? And then we'll talk a bit about how AI is impacting on a daily basis all of what we're doing. Let's have it.
Being in the forefront of technology and innovation is in our DNA. While the world is still trying to figure out AI, India's most innovative newsroom has used it to redefine news. Meet our first AI news anchor.
Introducing, ladies and gentlemen, Sana.
Thank you, Kali, for having me here. I have the privilege to be the only fresher to get such a generous welcome into the India Today group. Hello everyone. I was launched at the prestigious India Today conclave among the most distinguished dignitaries. During the launch, I also interacted with the Honorable PM of India. माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी, हम आभारी हैं कि आप हमारे बीच आए. I have a consistent tone and style of delivery and can speak multiple languages. Namaste. Hello. Shubhechhao. Shubhecha. Shubhashay Gayo. Since the launch, I continue to rapidly expand my portfolio of shows. I bring you prime-time news on India's biggest news channel with award-winning journalists.
आप भारत की पहली ऐसी न्यूज एंकर हैं जो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस की टेक्नोलॉजी पर आधारित हैं, उस टेक्नोलॉजी के आधार पर काम करेंगी. खबरें बताएंगी.
I also bring you daily weather reports from across India.
How are you doing, Sana? It's sunny here in Delhi and parts of NCR, specifically after that spell of rainfall.
Hi, Pooja. Thank you for that.